Thank you. Okay, so let me make sure everything is recording here. Okay, so before we start, why don't you tell us your name, where you're from, where you live, and anything else you want us to know about you before we dive in?
Hello, everybody. My name is Catalina Florina Florescu. I was born in Romania, in Dobroja, a region where the second largest river in Europe, the Danube, meets the Black Sea, and it forms the only delta on my beloved continent. I am in my 40s. I have a son who is 16, and I think that's about it.
Can you tell us about your mom? What was she like?
My mother was a dreamer. And before I fully answer the question, my parents were born during uncertain times. My father, for example, was born 2 years before World War II started, and my mother was born 3 years after the same war ended. Both of them devised their own ways to cope with difficult times. My father through humor, and my mother through the arts. My mother thought the arts to be like a portal to becoming immortal, and she thought the artists and are like gods and goddesses for whatever reason. My mother also lost her father when she was very young, 10, 11 years old. And probably through the arts, she managed, to believe in a different reality. And I don't know if it's possible, with the copyrights and everything, but my mother's favorite song was Johann Strauss' Radetzky March, which always ends the New Year's concert in Vienna. I remember she had this ritual with my older sister and me. She would invite us in the living room to listen to the concert. We would be seated, but my mother would stand up during the duration of the concert with a pencil in her hand, pretending to be a conductor, because she would have loved to be a conductor in real life.
What is your earliest memory of your mom?
It's a little bit hard to decide what's my earliest memory. Most of my memories are probably they come through looking at photographs, and we didn't have or we didn't use camera as often as we or I do it today. I have so many photos with my own son, but back then, growing up, we didn't have that possibility. But I think the fullest first memory would be when I graduated first grade, and the teacher at the time wanted to have like a big celebration, and it was divided into two parts. We were wearing uniforms, and we were also wearing different costumes, and I had like a blue dress, maybe to match my eyes, or maybe I was a flower of some sort, I don't know. But I remember that my mother took me to the hair salon, to have my hair done. And I'm only 7 and a few months old. And looking at the photos, not many photos of the event, my face was like, whatever. I don't, express being thrilled or anything like that. But my mother's face is full of light and life, because I think in retrospect, seeing me on stage performing those, skits, must have connected with this idea that there is something else outside of this reality, that the stage can be that portal into, I don't know, immortality. And I am looking at that photo from that event, and I see how full of life she is.
So beautiful. So how old were you when your mom was first diagnosed with cancer?
When I find out about her breast cancer, because I am the youngest in my family, and I'm the last one to find out about her breast cancer. So I'm 15, and we are not in our hometown, Tulcea. We are in Bucharest, and maybe it helps listeners to give them a little bit of context. She is diagnosed in the early 90s. and she has to travel from Turcia to Bucharest to get her chemotherapy. So one of the reasons why I find out in Bucharest is because she is going to go to have chemotherapy sessions. I didn't know then, why she took me with her. I was ecstatic, to leave my hometown for a few days. And this is another memory that I will forever have it with me, because we are in a small room, and for whatever reason, there is a large bed which restricts movement. So when she tells me I have breast cancer, I don't know if it was because of the bed or anything else, but I freeze, she freezes. I don't go to hug her. She doesn't come to hug me either. So we stay there, and between us there is this bed, which is going obviously to return whenever I'm either thinking about that moment or I'm writing. I have found a lot of, a performative force that objects have. Like equally, our bodies have that nature, but objects also have this performative force as well. So I'm 15.
So you have, how many siblings do you have?
Only one sister.
Okay. And you found out about it at 15.
Yes.
But how long do you think she had it before you were told?
It's possible maybe just half a year or something like that. I don't have access to her medical records. If you are to ask me, so what was her exact diagnosis? I cannot tell you that, which is frustrating, because all I can say is breast cancer, and that's it. And speaking with so many survivors of breast cancer, I have noticed that invariably they say something different about their diagnosis. So I don't have access to that. I assume that not a lot passed from when she found out about her diagnosis, but before that, my mother had metrorrhagia, which is an abnormal bleeding from the uterus. And this could be related to abortion. In the 80s, we are still in a totalitarian society. Women are not allowed to have abortions, but women from my mother's generation, invariably, all of them have at least one abortion. My mother couldn't go to have like a follow-up to see what's happening with her body, because the doctor is also supposedly to report all these things. So there is a lot of silence, that kind of oppressive silence when you cannot say what's happening, what's bothering you. I remember this episode when we were called on this landline phone, and my sister and I were asked to come and bring clean underwears for my mother, because the coworker said she had an accident. And my sister, who's a little bit older than me, 2.5 years, asked what happened. And I think the coworker said, well, don't worry, everything is fine. Supposedly she had like her period. Metrorrhagia could also signal a severe hormonal imbalance. So these are things that I found out, but I wonder if she knew what, I can search these days. I have a different, access to information, but I wonder if she knew anything about that, or they thought it must have been in connection with her abortion and the conditions in which, the abortion was done. So there is a lot of confusion, and there are bits and pieces that I can access to this day, which obviously frustrate me because I don't have access.
Of course. When you traveled with her to Bucharest that time, was it just something that she just took you and you just thought that it was going to be a fun day trip or fun trip with your mom?
Yeah, definitely.
And then do you think that or I mean, I don't know if you discussed it with her, but
Mhm.
did she just take you that time because she was then ready to tell you?
Um, it must have been one of those moments when I would eventually find out. So she wanted to probably to make sure that she was the one telling me what was going on. But like you said, for me in the beginning was just, oh, okay, I'm going to Bucharest. I love Bucharest because my hometown was like culturally speaking, I didn't have, many opportunities growing up, but Bucharest was full of them. And I said, oh, lovely. Um, but I also remember she took me with her to Fundeni. This is the biggest oncological hospital, I think, to this day in Romania, which is a little bit outside of Bucharest. So my mother, the patient now, she had to travel from Tulcea to Bucharest, and by car, this is like 4 hours and a half, by train 5 hours and a half, and on rare occasions by plane 45 minutes. So I just share this with you because to this day there are situations where hospitals are not fully equipped, to meet the needs of a patient, and this back and forth, it's exhausting to say the least.
And it seems like it's very common.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's very common. Did she do the similar type of trip with your sister?
No. Mm-mm.
So your sister knew.
Yeah.
And then during her chemo, so this kind of goes to the next question of what do you remember about your mom and her cancer? Did she get sick? Did she lose her hair? Was she starting to lose her hair? Was that something that you recognized?
This is something that still bothers me because, again, everything, all the answers that I'm going to give to you today are, like I said, like I feel like I'm an archaeologist who has like bits and pieces from, let's call it a vase, and I want to make this vase whole, and I know I cannot, but I'm trying best, to see what I remember and how much I remember. When she took me that time with her to Bucharest, she told me about her diagnosis, and she also took me with her to Funden, to this hospital. And I waited for her while she had the chemotherapy session, and I did hear her, moaning a little bit in distress. Best to my knowledge, my mother did not fully complete her chemotherapy sessions because she said she couldn't take them. Her body, she was not ready to go through all the pain or additional pain associated with chemotherapy sessions. That was the first and only time when I was with her, waiting, for her to finish the chemotherapy session. In terms of remembering, my mother managed to hide her cancer flawlessly, and her body also allowed her to hide her cancer flawlessly, because until the very end, and I mean like 3-4 weeks, until her the last weeks of her life, everything seemed to be under control. And one of the things that I planted, so to speak, in me was, after she died, I was angry with me because I was not a toddler. I was 15. When she died, I was 17. So I did not ask her any questions. She seemed fine. She seemed under control. And again, her body managed to hide everything because she did not lose her hair. She felt weak, but nothing major that would signal me, to do something. At least ask.
There's a great episode on a podcast called Family Secrets. that really talks about, um, it's interviewed the husband, the father of the family, and he talks about how his wife was dying from cancer and how she made it her wish not to let her teenage daughters know until it was necessary. And they basically went through 2 to 3 years of their high school lives
Mhm.
not knowing until, so it's a very, I imagine there are times where you feel like you're the only one,
Mhm.
where like it's only happened to you. Um, but this story, hearing this story and hearing the girls, the young women, then talk about it.
Mhm.
It is, it's painful because of course you would want to know that you were there for your mom, right? You wanted to know about it. You wanted to be there for her in her time of pain and need. Whereas I'm sure she was more concerned about you living as normal of a childhood as possible. So it's very conflicting.
I
I can
can only
imagine it.
imagine. Yeah,
Yeah,
but it's
yeah,
also my mother lost her father when she was 10 and 10, 11. So she must have felt that trauma reactivated. Like, she wanted to protect us. Like the maternal instinct is there with or without a diagnosis. But I guess, when she did hear about breast cancer, she must have thought of her father and more. There was an aunt on her mother's father's side who was diagnosed with breast cancer when she was very young. My mother just heard about the aunt. She didn't meet her because she was young at the time. But this particular woman, she is diagnosed very early in her life with breast cancer in her 20s. And then she has surgery. We don't know under which condition because it's different times altogether. But she dies within a year or so. So I guess in my mother's mind, she must have either thought of like breast cancer is a death sentence. I already know that my father died because when I was very young. So I know that she was extremely protective of us to make sure that we are us. We feel us, or we get as few scars as possible out of this.
right, right. When you mentioned of like you don't know about her cancer, the details of it because you hear people talk about their cancer now, right? We call it like the cancer language, right? The language of cancer, right? Like HER2 positive, ER negative, that kind of stuff. I mean, to let you know, I don't think they really knew all of that even in the 90s.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's even 10 years ago when I was going through it. I mean, I knew of it, but the language 10 years later is like even more developed. So it's crazy to think of how did they talk about it even
Mhm.
back then, right?
Yeah.
Do you remember if your mom talked about her cancer with her friends and family?
No, I don't think she did. She did say a lot about her cancer um, to our extended family because we are in a small family. She was the only child of my grandmother, um, and actually, there's a beautiful connection between them. I grew up with these two women, my maternal grandmother and my mother, and they were like together until my mother died. So no, I don't think she opened up. It was difficult for her to open up, and one of the reasons why it was difficult for her to open up was because, well, you mentioned that the language changed drastically, like how patients and their families talk about it, and I can only assume why it changed. Why it changed? Sorry. Um, there is a lack of information, like just minimum information. If a patient, has to travel from a small place to big cities, to get their treatment. In terms of what can be found locally, like in libraries or something like that, it's definitely outdated if it exists. So another reason why my mother was also silent was, I guess, she didn't know. She didn't know a lot, if at all, about her type of cancer from doctors. And these days there are group supports, to help patients open up if they can. Nobody is pushing anyone, but I have never been diagnosed with something like threatening, but I have found a lot of information listening to these stories, and it's comforting to listen, despite the heavy topic. So my mother didn't say things about her cancer for various reasons, and one of them is because, again, probably she didn't know what to say about it.
Right. And also, when you start talking about it and telling people, they're most likely going to ask questions.
Mhm.
And you don't know the answers. And so when you don't know the answers, you kind of feel inept, or, I mean, that is a reason why some people delay talking about their cancer until they have all the information, right? And if she didn't have all the information, how could she talk about it? That's
true.
That's huge. Yeah. And especially in a time and age in which people didn't talk about their health or cancer or private matters, where everything was normally probably kept to themselves.
Yes.
Yeah. So I guess that kind of answers, but I guess in the last weeks, when you say that she was really sick at the end, do you remember if any friends, family came around to help? Like here in America, it's like something happens and all of a sudden this huge, food brigade comes out. Sorry for the honking. There's people double parked outside, it's Thursday, it's parking day. So sorry for that noise. But, like these days when things happen, it's like, the food brigade comes out and everyone comes out in arms. So back in those days or in your situation, do you remember if there were friends, family that came around towards the end?
No. The neighbors didn't know either, because it is shameful, and I don't say it like I'm approving of this, but it's shameful, to have a life-threatening diagnosis. There is this irresponsible and quite disrespectful, correlation between somebody's diagnosis and their lifestyle. There is this reasoning, and I use quotation marks, there is this reasoning that that person must have done something terribly wrong to deserve this, and it was not the case. So in addition, to not knowing much or at all about her type of cancer, she didn't say anything to the neighbors, not because they were bad people, no, because there is, we are living in this, for listeners who are not familiar with communist architecture, we live in this communist flats, and it's a 4-story building. On each floor there are like 4 apartments. So everybody is like keeping to themselves and trying, to get through another day, because she is diagnosed kind of like when the whole Europe is starting, to change to these communist governments are going to be replaced by something else. So there is a lot going on already in society, and people are not encouraged to talk about their problems. If it's private, it should stay private.
When I did talk with other women about telling their parents, like when they had to tell or when they did tell their family, friends, and whatnot, it was a resounding answer that the hardest people for them to tell was their parents, and that feeling of ridiculous feeling, because I felt it in the moment as well. When I told my parents, it was a ridiculous feeling of shame that I had done something wrong, that it still happens today. And I find it more and women from different cultures, African cultures, Hispanic cultures, and whatnot, in which they don't want to still tell their families. It's interesting, but because the only answer that I can give it is that horrible feeling that you have done something wrong by this, that feeling of shame, which is just, it's ridiculous. And I knew in the moment when I felt it that it was absolutely ridiculous, but it is something that exists and is there. So yes, I do. I can empathize with that feeling. So you're welcome. After she passed, what were the hardest moments to get through without her?
My older sister is already in college. So when my mother, when it was obvious that things are moving, towards the inevitable, to put it this way, my sister came from Bucharest, where she was an undergraduate student. And after my mother died, my sister went back there. So it's just my father and my maternal grandmother. I have very good friends, extremely good friends, because we are in the last year of high school. We are teenagers, lots of fun, lots of bonding. I just distance myself from whatever is in the textbooks, because I don't care, to focus my energy there. But I am definitely, maybe instinctively, something is happening with me, trying, to process this loss again without therapy, because it's not available, without group support. So I want to read a lot. I cannot find, like I said before, I cannot find information up to date about cancer. So I'm reading things about philosophy, the meaning of life, and I'm reading plays, and I listen to plays on radio and watch plays on TV. But I'm reading heavily, and I have this anatomy textbook. I'm not going to be a student in medicine. I don't want to pursue that, but I'm flipping back and forth, like, obsessively. And I look at these illustrations with the skeletal system and the muscular system, and I'm just looking at them obsessively back and forth, and I have no idea why I'm doing this. But years later, when I come to the United States, because I think I mentioned after she died, I had these seeds of anger within my body. I didn't know what to do with them. I kept them there, along with the seeds of guilt. I'm not having anger towards when I talk about my mother diagnosis and what was left out, but I still have guilt, and probably I'll have this guilt with me forever. But when I came to the United States, and I'm interested in, finding out information about other people with life-threatening illnesses, I discovered Audre Lorde, the cancer journals. And when she talks about, in the late 70s, when she talks about her diagnosis from a Black lesbian woman, all that anger that she poured in those writings, I finally find an outlet to release my anger, or to start to release my anger. Because I said to myself, this is a woman who was diagnosed before my mother. And I was just imagining, well, if my mother could read this piece in translation, of course, maybe something else, would have, changed in her mind, attitude, whatever. I don't know. Again, the guilt is always a bastard. But I also discovered, like, Jo Spence. Jo Spence was a photographer from the United Kingdom. She died in 1992, like my mother, when she was looking at, like, images, representations of women who suffered because of breast cancer, what happens, with their bodies. And all she could find were these graphics, these illustrations, like the one in the textbook, anatomy textbook. So again, when I'm immediately after she died, I read a lot. I wanted to just find as much information about life in general. It's going to take me years to realize bits and pieces of her silence, my mother's silence. But if I were to return to your question, in addition to this obsessive reading, what I miss and I'm still missing is she was not part when I graduated from high school, college, when I got my master's, my PhD. She didn't witness, my transformation from a teen into a mother. And as I'm aging right now, and I'm in a premenopausal stage right now. I would have loved to have these dialogues with her. Of course, there are so many, women around me with whom I can talk freely, openly, but it's not the same. I don't have
Not the
those dialogues.
same. Not the same. Right.
So those are the things, immediately after she died, and just, I guess accumulating.
Right. Well, along those lines, what was your normal like before your mom's cancer? And then how did that change afterwards?
Because she managed to hide her cancer flawlessly. I keep saying, she was like an actress without being trained to be an actress. I don't think there was like a clear divide before and after, except for, of course, the obvious, because she was not there. We didn't have many things as a family. We didn't do many things as a family, in part because my father had a very intense schedule, and for years he didn't take days off for vacation. So the only thing that we did as a family was to have lunches together on Saturdays and Sundays, followed by, going out for a walk. So that is going to be interrupted by her not being there. But one of the things that I wanted to learn or to find out was how people mourn their lost ones. And it's interesting that I came here 23 years ago, and I have discovered so different ways to talk about mourning, the ones that we lost. Because in Christian Orthodoxy in my country, we have 2 Sundays during a year dedicated to the departed. We honor them, we go to the cemetery, etc. And that's, going to be my normal, so to speak, in quotation marks, to honor her legacy, in a way of speaking. But I also find a lot of comfort talking with other people, and when they tell me about their own traditions, because there is an interesting way to connect with other cultures, to see how we are similar when we suffer, when we are in pain, when we lost someone. So,
wow. So then, along those lines, how did her cancer affect your family? So how did it affect the dynamics between you, your sister, and your father?
everything is going to have it's a story with two different narratives, so to speak, because before she dies, everything is concealed, like it's nobody says anything, and also it's not a financial burden. I think it's important to say this. In the 90s and still to this day, many of the treatments are covered by the state in Romania. So financially, we are not suffering at all because my mother has cancer, as it is the case with families in the United States, or could be the case. But it does affect us on the emotional level because nobody knows how to talk about this, especially after she's not with us anymore. And each of us internalizes this loss differently. My grandmother keeps to cook and bake because this is what she has been doing her entire life, but she lost her only child. She lights a candle, she, thinks of her, she prays. My father goes to work, returns home, late hours as he used to do before, but this is, his schedule. He was a lovely, lovely father. My sister is in Bucharest, so we are together. Like, we love one another deeply. I don't want to sound like that there is no love. There is a lot of love, but we don't know how to connect. We don't know how to open up. We are afraid that if we open up, something, more traumatic may come out of that. Eventually, we discover through photography, through some memories, we discover, how to talk about my mother and my father, how to talk about his partner. My grandmother stays silent for the most part of it, because again, she lost her husband when she was young. She lost her only daughter. So that's the thing, not financial, but emotional.
Wow. So then how did her cancer affect you as a young woman? You talk about your anger.
Yeah.
But of course you're growing into being a young woman. So
Yes.
how did her cancer and the loss of her affect you?
I think I think it was something instinctively. I knew her silence was layered. I didn't know to which extent, but I'm very curious by nature, and I'm not easily satisfied. And those secrets that you mentioned before, now it is, kind of like my chance to discover, if I can discover anything, what was going on, what happened. And I stay in Bucharest for 4 years, and after those 4 years, I come to the United States. I think the biggest change for me is when I come to the United States, because I have access to a different kind of information. Even though you said that the language changed and is still changing, it is a huge difference. At least there is something I can, read by myself and discover by myself. And the more I read, I discover that it is very, very important to try to open up. And when my mother had the abortion, her body being controlled to that extent, I don't want that to happen to my body. So I'm trying to learn something out of this horrible experience with the abortion, with how, she managed her own cancer. It's all at the theoretical level, because I have never been diagnosed with cancer. But I'm trying, to learn something out of this, to be prepared maybe a little bit.
As you've gone through your life, are there moments or things that happen that bring her right back to you?
Yes, definitely. And there are like, because she loved the arts a lot, whenever I go to see a show, I feel like I'm taking my mother with me. Or this fall, I'm going to have Mia on stage in New York. So she will probably feel, ecstatic. That thing when I was in first grade and whatever, I was performing. This is going to be different because the story behind Mia is a little bit inspired by her. And she's with me when I travel. She's with me in the kitchen, because she was not good in trying recipes. She was not good at all. She took it like very personally, like she was upset when something was not according, to her plans. And when I'm messing things in the kitchen, I start to laugh, because I'm thinking like, oh, okay, I'm definitely my mother's daughter. And maybe I should try again or give up. But there are the small things, and sometimes because I'm a mother and my son is a teenager, when he was around 14 and especially 15, so last year during the pandemic, I just kind of, I looked at him and I remember, oh, at 15 I was going through this. So it's interesting, like parents to look at our kids and to discover how fortunate we are for the time being, to still have, the whole family.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's take a bit of a turn. As you entered adulthood, what was your relationship with your healthcare professionals? So did you go frequently to a doctor? Tell us
Yeah.
about your own health as it relates to your mom's cancer.
I schedule yearly appointments for to have mammograms. Um, I do self exams, but that's something maybe not related to healthcare. I try to have an open relationship with my doctors, but there is something I think you pointed out before, Lori. You said something about how responsible we also must be. There is this wonderful book by John Didion that is kind of like the Bible for me, because there is this episode when John Didion's husband collapses on the floor. She calls 911, he's hospitalized, and she has like a dialogue with the medical team in which she feels, although she's a woman of high intellect, she feels like lost. The medical jargon could be difficult to process, but she doesn't give up. And this is the moment, when I thought it was so inspirational. She goes to find as much information about her husband's diagnosis as possible. So next time when she goes to talk to the doctor, she's a little bit informed. And instead of being told about a diagnosis, that passive mode, she tries to switch from passive into being active. So I'm trying best, to my possibilities and resources to be in contact with my doctor, to be as open as possible, and to find information online. We are vulnerable, and I'm not going to even, pretend otherwise. But there is that, at least when I'm looking back at my mother, she must have been afraid, terribly afraid, because in part, she didn't have access to whichever should have been available back then. So I'm trying, to approach this body that we have from a perspective, it is going to break. I don't know how, when, will I be ready? I don't know. There are the unscripted, moments, but I try to be as open and honest with myself, especially because obviously I'm aging.
I know.
And my mother was 45 when she died. And when I turned 45, it was like last year. And it was in the beginning of the pandemic. And it's a silly thing, but I was so happy passing 45. And now I'm 46 because my birthday is in March. It was such a difficult year, but like I had this small victory. I'm over 45. I don't know. It's silly because, like we mentioned, every single cancer is different. But 45 meant something else for me.
Absolutely. And it is that feeling of, okay, did I pass it? Like, has it passed me over because I've now outlived my mother?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. You didn't mention it, but if we can talk a little bit about it, how diligent are you when it comes to your annual cancer screenings?
I schedule those religiously. And I encourage my sister to do the same. And I do self-exams because those screenings are just scheduled annually. Sometimes I have only a mammogram. If that's not conclusive, I have an ultrasound. So I don't skip on those. I also don't skip on having a pap test. And I am also, because I'm over 45, now I can have a free colonoscopy. So
it just keeps adding up. It just keeps adding up.
Apparently.
But good for you. Good for you for doing it, Catalina.
Yeah,
it's a lot. It freezes up a lot of people. They become traumatized because they don't want to know. So good for you. That's my kudos back to you. Good for you. Let's see. So do you talk to your son about your mom?
Oh, yes.
So what do you say? Yeah.
Because I go to Romania every single summer. When I go to my hometown, I pass by the cemetery and I light a candle. And I took him there ever since he was 3. And he didn't, understand much when he was 3. But of course, I like to talk about my parents simply because there were funny moments. And it's interesting, to connect with the joy that I had growing up. And now that he's a little bit older, and he knows how my mother died and he knows how my father died. I don't know if it's connected or not, but he has developed this interest to, biomechanical engineering. So he wants me to live forever. So it's important for me to talk with him. We have a very open relationship. It's true. I had an episode in the beginning of the year with a 10-day migraine, and I was scared. And I think it was just a year altogether. I couldn't hide everything. Like, he noticed something was happening with me, because I needed more rest than usual. So I'm trying to be as open as possible. But would I be as protective as my mother was? Definitely. We cannot help, the maternal instinct is going to kick in. But if I were to be diagnosed, I need to tell him what I have, because I think, again, we are vulnerable, but I feel that they should know about the diagnosis. Not to be scared. That's not going, to be completely ignored, but just, to find some kind of possibility to talk about what is difficult to talk about.
Well, you mentioned it. I mean, it was, because your mom didn't share it with you, you now carry this guilt, right?
Yes.
So that's something that I can imagine you don't want your son to carry.
That's true.
And I'll say this in my own experience, being honest and truthful with my kids with my daughters about my own diagnosis and everything, it has created a sense of trust. So even though you want to protect them from this horribleness that could happen, right? Mm-hmm. It's the sense of trust that is actually created and holds more dear than the disease itself. It's so I applaud you for when the time comes. The time comes, hopefully never comes, but
yeah, not gonna.
I think the decades later, we've all learned that the more we talk with our kids and the more we're transparent with them, the healthier they are in the end, mentally as well as physically. Yeah. So is there something that you do now as an adult? You mentioned the kitchen, you mentioned your cooking, that when you look back at it and say, oh, I got that from my mom. I get that from my mom. Anything else besides the cooking?
Oh, the cooking is the comedy. I got this idea that there must be something else outside of this reality. The love for the arts, definitely, because I have. She loved the arts, and she also thought those artists are like akin to gods and goddesses. I mentioned that, and sometimes, she would like to follow whatever was trending. So unlike her, I like, to listen to stories from, the underdog, let's put it that way. But the love for the arts is definitely with me, and it is because of her.
Anything else you'd like to add?
I want to, I want to share a moment when she was in her room. She knew she had breast cancer, and she was holding a painting in her hands. When I entered the room, I didn't put 2 and 2 together because she loved the arts. The painting was there before the diagnosis, but the way she was holding against the torso more than against, in front of her face, in retrospect, obviously, made me think the woman in the painting is nude with two breasts which appear to be healthy. My mother, again, is already diagnosed with breast cancer. I wonder if she looked at that painting like you would look in a mirror. And I cannot travel back in time. I cannot just retrieve the moment. But this is how I envision all the dialogue, so to speak. I have a photo with my mother when she's 2, holding a doll in her hands. I'm looking at her and I'm 46. She must have been 2 in that photo. I cannot be the mother of my own mother, but I want to protect whatever is left of her. And towards, and this is the last thing probably I'm going to share, towards the end of her life, she requested a portable radio to have music, to listen to music, and the radio was playing The Show Must Go On. And she didn't know English, and she asked my sister and me, what does it mean? What does it mean? And we looked at each other like, could we tell the truth? We'll not tell the truth because it's an emotional song. And I said, and I'm going to say this in Romanian, Mama, spectacolul va continua. I don't think she believed me fully, but again, her favorite song, it's Radetzky March. I don't know if you can incorporate it to, all the copyright restrictions, but to honor her legacy, it would be nice, to end the dialogue with that. Thank you so much, Lori.
I'll look into it. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. I know it's as difficult as it is to talk through it. And I know how important it is to share the story and memory. So thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. It was great.